Today is Yom HaShoah v'Hagvura, Holocaust Remembrance Day. And it happens to coincide with the Parshat HaShavua of Shmini. Shmini describes the death, the demise of two sons of Aaron HaKohen. As the Jewish people are dedicating the Mishkan, the tabernacle, two of the children of Aaron are consumed by a flame that descends from Shamayim. And therefore Aaron HaKohen himself experiences a personal, tragic Holocaust as well. Aaron's reaction, or lack of reaction thereof, is, as the Torah attests, and all of us are familiar with it, Vayidom Aaron, Dmama, Vayidom, Dom. Aaron is silent. He does not react, he does not protest, he does not scream, he does not cry. And certainly at first glance, this is a very, very strange lack of reaction. Chazal praise Aaron's acceptance of the decree of Hashem, that he should lose two of his sons. However, in a few parshiot on, Parshat Emor, the very beginning of the parsha is introduced by, or specifically, a directive that Hashem gives to Aaron directly. The directive that Kohanim, priests, are not allowed to enter the confines of the Mishkan, of the tabernacle, when they are inebriated, in a state of drunkenness or after having imbibed wine. And this is given to Aaron specifically. Chazal say that this was a reward to Aaron for accepting God's judgment when both of his sons died. However, I believe that perhaps here HaKadosh Baruch Hu was giving Aaron some direction and telling him, look, for someone to lose two children and not to emote and not to express and to remain silent, that is ultimately something that could be very destructive. When a person harbors those emotions internally, eventually they can implode, and the person themselves can explode, if you may. And therefore, Chazal explained that drinking wine, nichnas yayin yatsa sod, wine is a means of allotting ourselves to express ourselves. It is something that initiates expression and emoting. And therefore, maybe God is telling Aaron, when you enter the confines of the Kodesh, then you cannot drink wine. But there are certain times in your life when you should drink wine, when you should invite the expression of emotion, when you should break that silence and be able to emote and share. And therefore, Hashem is giving Aaron, in a sense, a formula for a successful and healthy living. Even when a person is in pain, even when a person is faced with travesty, and, as we said, a personal Holocaust, they too have to be able to express that pain, to emote, to share. Otherwise, it can lead to a very unhealthy existence. Rabbi Riskin, I heard recently, told a story that when he was a boy, he lived in Brooklyn, and he would visit the Kloisenberg Rav. The Kloisenberg Rav had a kehillah in Brooklyn. He was a survivor of the Holocaust, as were many of the members of his congregation, of his kehillah, many of his Hasidim. And Rabbi Riskin used to walk there about a mile away on Shabbat to daven with the Kloisenberg Rav. And he actually was there at one of the first Brit Milahs, first the circumcisions that was offered to one of the babies that were born following the Holocaust. And Rabbi Riskin explains that everyone proclaimed, as is customary at a Brit Milah, at a circumcision, the pasuk, the verse from Yechezkel Hanavi, Va'omer lach b'damayich chayi. Simple understanding is, and we proclaim b'damayich, badam, b'dam, the blood is what allots us the opportunity to chayi, to live. Blood provides life. But the Kloisenberg Rav explained that here damayich is not referring to blood, but rather it's referring to domim. The same Vayidom Aharon, Dmama, the silence, B'damayich Chayi. We Holocaust survivors have survived B'damayich, in silence. And even though we remain silent, And even though the Nazis tried to silence us and destroy us, Chayi, we still proclaim, we still live, we still march forward, and are very much part of the world. Our nation still survives. And I would like to suggest that I would never compare Holocausts or tragedies, but when we look at Aaron's personal Holocaust, personal tragedy, and the solution that God proposes to him, telling him that you have to break this silence, that you have to be able to discuss and to emote, I think the same thing emerged with regards to the national Holocaust, the global Holocaust, the virtual destruction of the Jewish people, by which ultimately Holocaust survivors who were silent, who would never speak or tell their story, eventually began to emote, began to relate, began to express, began to tell and share their stories with people around them. An amazing program called Zikaron Basalon. In a small, intimate atmosphere of a living room, a Holocaust survivor can sit and feels comfortable enough to share that story with others. And ultimately, being able to share that story, being able to express and to emote and to discuss, is what allows us to have historical reflection for the sake of national perpetuation. And sure enough, this is a message that resonates with regards to Holocaust Memorial Day, the importance, the credence that has to be given to expression, to sharing those stories so that we never forget, and sure enough, ultimately to ensure that such travesty and such tragedy never happens again. Yesterday, I gave a shiur, a talk in Kibbutz Mesuot Yitzchak. The woman came over to me afterwards and she told me that she is a Holocaust survivor. She was someone who hid during the course of the Holocaust. She was from Amsterdam, and she explained that she has to sleep today, the day before Holocaust Remembrance Day, because tomorrow, on this day, she will be busy speaking and disseminating her message and speaking throughout various venues in Israel. How important it is for them to share their story so that we can remember. And I have to say that if this is a lesson that we can learn regarding reflection on this day in which we commemorate, I believe that we can incorporate the same message with regards to personal Holocaust. It would be absurd for us to compare Holocaust, tragedies, catastrophes, but everyone views chas v'chalila, their own personal travesty, as being a Holocaust to themselves. Our loss of Gila was, in a sense, a personal Holocaust. And one of the lessons that I think we learned and that we have to teach others is the importance of emoting, sharing the story. Because when it comes to mental health and mental health illness and challenges and suicide prevention, these were a generation ago a taboo. Issues that never were discussed, that were ignored, that were buried under the rug. And today, on Holocaust Remembrance Day, it's important for us to remember as well that mental health challenges haunt the global community and certainly the Jewish community. And at the very least, we have to learn to break that silence. Vayidom Aaron, to remain kol dmama daka, with a silent voice. Not to break that silence would be a travesty. We have to learn from our experiences. We have to learn from others. We have to share their stories to ensure that mental health is certainly addressed, and hopefully, Emir Hashem, the day will come when it is cured. And so it is my hope and prayer on this day of Holocaust Remembrance Day, that as we break the silence and as we hear and listen to the survivors, the travesties and the catastrophes that befall them and that befall the Jewish nation as a whole, that we should be able to commemorate for the sake of perpetuation. And the same should be true with regards to mental health in a personal reflection, that we too should be able to break that dmama, break that silence, and share the stories and share the challenges that people still experience to this very day. And hopefully, as a result of our enjoining in this mass commemoration, in this mass discussion, in this mass dialogue on the problems and the travesties that befall the Jewish people in the past, and the problems and the challenges that still continue to haunt the Jewish people to this day, will be zoche and privileged to truly witness a salvation for all of us on a personal level, and of course for all of us as a great Jewish nation.